What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Ready, Ted, Go. Talking all things SEC football. It's Sunday night. Another different night for me. Just thought I'd shake it up once again. Maybe right after all of the games ended last night. Recap the week. Talk a little bit about something coming up on Tuesday. That was one of the main reasons why we wanted to go live tonight instead of the middle of the week, because something very interesting happening on Tuesday of this week, and that is the first week of the College Football Playoff Committee meeting to put out the first rankings for the 4-team playoff this year. So very, very interesting, very interesting week coming up. Also a lot of games this week, a lot of games. We are fully into, I would say we're out of mid-season mode and fully into that 75% into the season and stretch run for all teams. I think a lot of teams have a pretty good gauntlet of what is gonna tell the tape for their playoff hopes in November. I think November is going to tell us a lot. I think my picks for the playoff committee are not going to match tonight. We're going to talk about each team. We're going to talk about who we think is going to be in that I'm going to try to predict who's going to be in that 4-team playoff from the committee on Tuesday night. But I'm also going to pick who I think should be in that 4-team playoff committee. And we're going to talk about 10 or 11 teams who we're going to look at their resumes and kind of see. It's always a cool time because it gives us an opportunity to go outside of the SEC a little bit and talk a little bit of football outside of the SEC. Adam Fisher's on here, number one fan, super fan. You get 1 month free of Facebook. Corny. Do I have a little? I don't even know if you can hear this. A little cheering. 1 month free of Facebook. I've never used that effect right there. You're the first person I've used it on. So, and that one as well. So sounds more like Saturday Night Live right now than the SEC podcast. But yeah, man. So I am ready to get into this conversation about the College Football Playoff Committee. But let's recap the games from Week 9 really quick. Auburn, Mississippi State. I didn't lose. I didn't lose this week. So I stay at the lowest of lows of double-digit losses right now at 10. I think I averaged it up, and I'm 86 and 10 right now. That's pretty good, man. I'm better in the loss category, and I'm a couple wins better than Kirby Smart is right now in his first 9 years of coaching. But I'm guaranteed probably in November to lose a few more of these, but we'll see. Let's recap. Auburn gets their first SEC win at home against Mississippi State. Really thought that you saw more of Peyton Thorne, right? You saw more of Peyton Thorne, and they win by 2 touchdowns. Peyton Thorne, 230 yards, 3 TDs, less of Robbie Ashford, more Peyton Thorne in this game. Hunter ran for 144 yards. Great win for Auburn. Congratulations, Auburn, on your first SEC win. Did pick that one. Mississippi State's going down in the blaze of glory quick as well. 1-4 in SEC play. Texas A&M routes South Carolina. South Carolina's going down in the blaze of glory as we see it right now as well. Shane Beamer's got excuse after excuse after excuse. He always has the great conversation at the end of the night about how this team's playing so hard. He loves that team. And I get it, man, but I don't think you can get past the fact that you have Spencer Rattler and you have a ton of NIL money out there on some players, and they're not putting it up. Shane Beamer last week is one of my hot seats. He's one of my hot seats. I'm concerned about old Shane. Tennessee, man. Tennessee goes to Kentucky. I thought that game was going to be a little bit more. I thought Tennessee was going to win by more. I think I called it 2 touchdowns. It was close. They ended up winning by 6 against Kentucky, which, if you look at it on paper, it was at Kroger Field. Kroger Field is not a very daunting place to play. In my opinion, I think the stadium was half full. I think I mentioned that too, and Adam Fisher laughed about it, but it did look like Kentucky was moving on to football excuse me, basketball season. I need to make sure that I don't say that comment too many times because apparently Doring from NC State caught Steve Smith's comment when he was picking him on game day about how NC State was moving on to basketball. And basically, Steve Smith got a big, um, a big not welcome remark from Chris Doring, and he said, "This is not a basketball school. This is a football school." And then I think he realized he smashed every other sport at NC State, and he was like, "This is not just a football school. These kids work hard." But Steve Smith definitely rubbed Doring from NC State wrong. So I'll be careful how I notate anything about South Carolina and Kentucky and being a basketball school. So, but to further that, Tennessee beats Kentucky, goes to 6-2 and 3-2 in the SEC, firmly sitting there with Florida and Missouri. I say that, but those are the last. I think those are the last three teams: Tennessee, Missouri, Georgia are the last three teams that have anything to say anything about the East, in my opinion. Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. Ole Miss routes Vanderbilt. I think we knew that was going to happen. Ole Miss, man, they've crept back up into number 12. And when we start talking about playoff contenders, wait till you see how some of this stuff lands out when I started doing some of the work. And then the big game on the week, Georgia, Florida. Everybody, there were certain people out there that picked Florida. There were certain people that said that the point spread was too much. There were certain people that said Graham Mertz was going to do this and the rushing attack was going to do that. And they had a couple of key plays from scrimmage, but I would honestly say, and that 7 points in the fourth was on the second string. So this game was easily Georgia. Georgia did a lot of things good defensively. Carson Beck looked like, right now, Carson Beck has better numbers than Stetson Bennett did at this point in the season. So that should be scary for you. So I'm sick and tired of hearing the legs thing. Does he have the legs? Does he have the wow factor? Right now, he's putting the ball wherever he wants to. And I think it showed that we would love to have Brock Bowers back, but there are so many weapons on that Georgia offense. So many weapons. Dejon Edwards had an incredible day. I think Kendall Milton ran the ball extremely effective. You didn't see much outside of them. You didn't really see Cash Jones. You saw Dylan Bell a little bit. You saw more on Dylan Bell from the wide receiver position. He caught a touchdown pass from Carson Beck. And you didn't see Rod Robinson, although I heard he traveled and he dressed out. So that's good. So we're getting healthier. We're getting deeper as far as the running back position is concerned. But Georgia kind of staked this claim. Is this the last time you see Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville? Who knows? Who knows? I know there's two things going around. I think Kirby wants a home and home. I think the other thing is to establish another location. But I think that location, that's kind of the reason why it was Jacksonville, because I really think the only location in between that can hold the people would be Mercedes-Benz. And then all you're going to hear about from Florida is how that's really not a kind of a neutral side either. So I think you just take it home and home. I don't think it does anything. I think it would do more for Georgia to be going to the swamp and Florida to be coming to Athens between the hedges. Like, that's where I think it needs to stay. But that's just my 2 cents. We're going to pick the Week 10 games at the end tonight, and what a Week 10 it is. The good news is I'm going to be able to experience one of these big Week 10 games live in Athens between the hedges this weekend. I'm heading up to, between the hedges, God's country, as I call it, right when a cold front comes in. I'm a Floridian now. I live in Florida. So, I saw that 30 degrees and the highs are 68 or going to be up there. And we get 68, man, when we put a little light jacket on down here. Up there, man, 68's like shorts and t-shirt weather for people. So lucky. I didn't know this Missouri game was going to be this weekend. Last year for the Tennessee game, it's like, man, never seen Tennessee play Georgia. And so that ended up being one of the biggest games of the year. And then when we booked these tickets, we were like, we always go up for one game a year. We try to, and because we live in Florida now, but when we go up there, it's like Missouri always plays us tough, regardless of Missouri's having a great year or a bad year or whatever. It's just something about Missouri. We always get the best from Missouri. So we're like, let's do Missouri, right? We had prior obligations for the Ole Miss game, and we just, when we go up to the Georgia area, we like to see a little bit, fall weather, the leaves turning, things of that nature. And so we kind of try to do November. And so we did. And man, here we are again. Get to see Missouri, one loss Missouri. This could say a stamp on the East, per se. So this is going to be an incredible weekend for Georgia. It's an incredible a weekend game against Missouri this weekend. It turned out to be a game that, if you look back on the schedule a couple of months back, you would be like, this is just going to be that Georgia Missouri game where Missouri is going to be very naggy. But now you got an offense to go with the defense of Missouri, and Georgia no longer has the option to come out flat against this team, because they're averaging a lot of yards on offense, and they're big up front. And we'll talk about it more when we get into the picks. But I get the chance to see. That's why a lot of this stuff is being pushed up. But the good thing is that we're pushing it up too, to see really how Tuesday lands in these first rankings. But it's good. Let's dive right into Tuesday really quick. So Tuesday. So this is the last year of the college football 14 playoff. Bittersweet, but I do think that it needs to happen, because I think when we start talking about some of these teams, if this was your 8-team or 12-team format type thing, which I think it's 12, but if this was your 12-team format, then you would definitely be in a situation where we would have an incredible 12 teams, even though some of these teams would be left out, because the format is top four, basically your winner of every area, which I don't know if the Pac-12 is not going to exist next year unless those two teams stay and, I don't know, play for the Pac-12 championship. That's going to be weird. But you got Big 10 that's going to be Big 20 next year. You got SEC gaining 2 schools. You got ACC. Do they get broken down more? A lot's going to happen in the offseason. But basically, you do have a 12-team playoff, and how they kind of work it around is to be noticed. But let's talk about what to expect. So the committee is coming together. They're going to be there. They watched games on last night. They probably met most of the day-to-day. And they will finalize everything and get it together for Tuesday night. Obviously, they'll probably have it all together. They probably have it together by now, but they stay away from Monday for Monday Night Football reasons. So that I know of. So let's talk really quick. Let's talk about who's in the playoff talk right now. So I think these are the teams that are kind of being talked about as we see one out of these 9 teams that are possibly going to be in there. I think one of these 9 teams are in, even after we predict who the 4 teams are. So let's look really quick. So I think Georgia's in this conversation. This is in no order, by the way. I think Georgia's in this conversation. I think Michigan's in this conversation, definitely. I think Ohio State's in this conversation. I think Washington's in this conversation. I think Oregon is. I think FSU is. I think Alabama is. I think Penn State is. And I think Texas is in this conversation. So those are like my 9 teams. And if I was have a quote unquote top 10, I should have done a 12. If I did 12, because I think I can throw a few teams in there right off the bat. If I did 12, I think that LSU would be in that conversation a little, probably as the 10th team. I think that Notre Dame would be in that conversation as the 11th team. And I honestly think this is kind of off rip, because I don't know who's really sitting there, but maybe there's not really another ACC team that I would say. I would probably have to go. It's tough, man, because I would have said it would have been Utah, but Utah lost this weekend too. I don't know. I would probably say, I'd throw out there that it might be, maybe you could throw out, this is a tough one, man. North Carolina? I don't know. North Carolina, maybe. Let's just throw that one out there as the 12th team, but I don't think North Carolina should be in anything right now. So with that being said, let's look at who first. Let's look at who I think they will be and kind of and the reason why. So let's look really quick at, I think that this is what they're going to do with the 4 teams right here. I think that the committee is going to look at Georgia, right? This is in no order yet. They're going to look at Georgia, and they're going to see they beat Kentucky very well. 51, I think, to 13. Kentucky was ranked 20th at that time. And then you got Florida was the second best team in the East, coming off a good win over a couple of good teams. They beat Tennessee, and Florida played a good Utah team on the road to begin the year. Now that game looks pretty good as far as the strength of schedule is concerned. But I think Florida was 5-2, and they're sitting there as a really solid. They win that game, they control their own destiny in the East, because they still, I mean, they control the East, because they would have beaten Georgia, they would have beaten Florida in the head-to-head in both, and so they were home free. They went out. They go to the SEC championship. So I think you got to count Florida as a person in there of interest to boost Georgia's resume, and I'll show you why that's very important in a second. When you look at Washington, Washington did not play very well this past weekend. Washington almost lost that game this weekend. And so, like, when you look at Washington, do you really know who they are? They did beat Oregon 36-33, and I think Oregon is probably, Oregon would be, as far as resume, let's just wait. Washington, their big win is Oregon. Ohio State, their big win is Notre Dame, and Penn State. Penn State was ranked, I think, 6th at that time, and Notre Dame was up there around 5th, I think. So those are the big wins from Ohio State. You look at FSU, the LSU game, the Duke game, but then you also, a lot of people are, you can't include Clemson in that. Clemson's a 500 team right now, guys. So you can't include that. So you got a Duke team that got absolutely manhandled this past weekend, and you got Clemson. So basically now you have a 2-loss LSU team that is their best team on their resume, that they beat by a couple touchdowns at the very beginning of the year. So FSU's resume is not as strong as it should have been, because Duke was a good win at that time, but now Duke is not looking so hot anymore. Clemson is definitely not looking so hot no more at 4-4. And then you got Washington, 8-0. Best win is Oregon by far. And then Oregon. But here's the thing, man. Look at Oregon. Oregon has played Utah. At that time, Colorado was ranked. I know Colorado has dropped a little bit. Colorado and Washington obviously lost by 3 to Washington on their resume, and Washington State is unranked, but that's a really, really good Washington State team that's playing in a really, really hard Pac-12 conference right now, who has played Oregon, who has played Washington, and who has played USC. So that's a good Washington State team. So how do we see the playoff committee picking this, really, right? Now, everybody is saying the playoff committee is going to pick Michigan first. I don't think that will happen. I'm going to shock the world with my 4. So I think 4th is going to be Washington. Okay. Because I think Washington's going to come in at 4 because they're 8-0, and their big wins are against an Oregon team. And then after that, I'm almost changing my mind. Man, it's between them and FSU at 4. It's really solidly FSU. I'm also picking who I think they're going to pick. I think it's going to be FSU. Sorry, let me backtrack. FSU is going to be 4. The committee is going to put them at 4 for solid wins against LSU. Duke is going to be a solid win for them. They're not going to be able to use Clemson. So I think FSU is 4. I think they come in with Ohio State at 3rd. And I think Ohio State's big wins are Notre Dame and Penn State. And then I think they're going to put Michigan 2nd. But give me a second, because I'm going to talk about Michigan in a second. But Michigan is going to be 2nd. Kirk Herbstreit, a lot of people are driving Michigan first. And Georgia's going to be 1. Wins against Kentucky, who was ranked 20th at that time. A good Florida team who was 5-2, who could have controlled, who would have been ranked if Florida beats Georgia, they would have been ranked. They would have been 6-2, and they would have controlled their own destiny in the East. That's not blowing up a resume. So that's what you're going to see. You're going to see FSU in that order. So, man, if the playoffs started on next Saturday and they were picking them on Tuesday, you would see Georgia playing FSU and you would see Michigan playing Ohio State. Now, we all know that Michigan and Ohio State are going to play each other and beat up on each other. We all know that Georgia still has a Missouri, an Ole Miss, a Tennessee. There's a lot of football to play, right? A ton of football to play. We all know that. There's some big games left. So let me tell you how I would pick it. If I was picking it, and it, when you look at the things that the committee would be looking at, this is why I still think the committee thing is broken. Okay, it's 100% broken. It really is, because there's as much as you could say about reputation of Michigan that you could say about reputation of Georgia. Um, you may not like it, but you got to Georgia's unbeaten in 2.5 years. Like, they're unbeaten in 2.5 years. So if we're going off prestige and who they are and this and that and the other, you put Georgia at 1. In my opinion, if they're not going to put Georgia at 1, they're going to put Michigan. Michigan, who have they played? Michigan has played nobody. And Kirk Herbstreit continues to say, well, Michigan has the it factor on paper. I mean, as far as what we've seen and how they've won these games and how they've controlled, and it's like they've played nobody. I think I kept their schedule up on purpose, because I was like, I don't want anybody to think I'm being that guy. But in the Big Ten right now, we'll look at Week 10. Because Michigan, let's see who Michigan has this week. Michigan has Purdue this week. So let's look really quick at Michigan's schedule so far. So they beat East Carolina. Wow. UNLV. Wow. Listen to this schedule. Bowling Green. Wow. Rutgers. Wow. Nebraska. Whew. I would have thought Nebraska maybe, but Nebraska's, once again, that's eye candy from 20 years ago. Minnesota, wow. Indiana, 52-7, and I'll say Indiana played Ohio State a little bit tight this weekend. Michigan State, dumpster fire this year, and you get Purdue. Now, everything will tell the tale for Michigan. They may give Michigan their little props this week, just to give them their props, because what they're going to be made of is come in 2 weeks when they play Penn State. That's going to be the game at 12 o'clock. But can I tell you something? 2 out of the last 3 games of this series for them is Penn State and Ohio State. So we'll know exactly what Michigan's made out of. However, if the playoff committee is doing this off of where everybody is at right now, here's my 4. And call me crazy if you want to, but here's my 4. Number 4, for me, number 4 is FSU. Okay, as far as who we are alone. Now, before we do that, let's talk about a couple teams that I picked in there that are sitting on the outside that people may say they're looking in. Let's talk really quick about Texas. Texas should have a little bit of leadway. Texas has beaten Alabama, has beaten a Kansas team that just beat Oklahoma. Kansas is ranked 24th when Texas beat Kansas, and Texas beat Kansas State, who was ranked 25th. So out of all these teams, in my opinion, these next 2 teams I'm going to talk about have actually beaten the most ranked teams when they played them, the most ranked teams. And then you got Alabama. You don't want to hear Alabama, but guess what? Alabama's there, man. And Alabama's peaking at the right time. And by the way, Alabama is undefeated in the SEC West. And by the way, Alabama will have a lot to say about those rankings, regardless of how this goes this weekend, because on Tuesday, because on this weekend they play LSU, and that's going to say a lot about whether they deserve that 4th spot, because FSU's sitting there at 4 per the committee. So Alabama has a really good resume. Texas beat that same Alabama team. Alabama beat Ole Miss. They were 15th at that time. Beat Tennessee. They were 17th at that time, and they have LSU this weekend. So there's a lot of reasons why I should put one of these teams in there as my 4th team. I would if I was picking them next week and I got to see this Alabama LSU game. I could tell you a lot, because that would determine if FSU was sitting there at 4. So if I was picking them right now, just so you know, Michigan wouldn't even be in my top 4. Wouldn't even be in my top 4. They've played nobody. We're picking them right now. If you're picking them off of what they've done, their body of work, and who they've played nobody. I just read them off to you. Bowling Green, Rutgers. The list goes on of UNLV of just haven't played anybody. And yeah, you beat them, but like, if SEC teams are playing those same teams, they're beating them by the same amount. So Michigan's not even in my top 4. Number 4 for me is FSU. Number 3 for me is Washington. Okay, Washington is my 3. Ohio State is my 2. And Georgia's my 1. I still think that Ohio State beats Notre Dame and Penn State, but I think Notre Dame is still undecided in that. I think Penn State had some iffiness this weekend. I think Penn State played Indiana. I'm sorry. Penn State had some iffiness this weekend against Indiana. So I would have it Georgia, Ohio State, Washington, FSU. Michigan wouldn't even be in my top 4 because we're picking it this week. Next week they have some pull. So we'll see what it's like. But what do I think? What do I think the committee is going to do? I think the committee is going to do Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and FSU. So that's who they're going to pick. And realistically, they're going to do that. But they all know that the thing they're going to get into is when you look at 2 and 3, they're going to play each other later on. But they're going to foil themselves because if they're looking at the body of work right now, Michigan shouldn't even be in there. So I'm curious to see how this all lands. And if Michigan's up there at 1, I'm not being Georgia biased, but if Michigan's up there at 1, I have no, we don't have to gripe about it or complain about it because it's going away after this year, but I have no, faith in that committee at all. Zero faith in that committee at all. So we'll see how it lands. It'll be kind of cool to see, but let's look ahead and let's pick these games for week 10 in the SEC. Let's backtrack a little bit. Let me get on track real quick. And probably one of the best weeks for college football, week 10 and week 11 coming up is a real gauntlet, especially in the SEC. But man, not only in the SEC, but all around, you're going to see a lot of teams that are really you're gonna see what they're made of. I mean, it's definitely started for Georgia already. But starting my 10-game 86 and 10 streak in the SEC. 86 and 10. Let's look at Kentucky, Mississippi State, 7:30 in Cowbellville, Starkville, Mississippi. It's a 7:30 game. It's a cold front coming through down into Mississippi. The cowbells will be loud, and the cowbells will be loud, and it will be a little cooler. I don't think Mississippi State. I mean, it's Kentucky by 3. I don't know what that line is, man. I have no idea because Kentucky's better. Kentucky's better than every team that they've lost to. I think I would have to say besides Alabama. So I think Kentucky wins that. I think they cover. They definitely cover, even though it is in Cowbellville. But Cowbellville right now is not very promising. Auburn 4:00 game. SEC Network goes to Vanderbilt. They get their second SEC win. Auburn will get their second SEC win. This will be a big one for them in Vandy. I don't think we're talking about anything about game time. I don't think we're talking anything about home and away with this one. It's going to feel like a home game for Auburn, regardless of if there's a fan in the stand, because it always does at Vanderbilt for the opposing team. So when we look at that, at the end of the day, I think we look at Auburn winning that game very easily. You look at South Carolina, Jacksonville State, 2-6 South Carolina. When you look at that, man, Jacksonville State's 7-2. I don't know. I mean, it's South Carolina 14. Let's go South Carolina. They need a win, in all honesty. So I'm going South Carolina on that one. Florida, Arkansas. Do I want Arkansas? Do I want Arkansas to get that? Does Arkansas need one? Yeah, but Florida's going to get this one. It's in the swamp. It's a 12:00 game. That might be the only thing that they're having going for Florida. And so Florida wins, goes to 6-3, 4-2 in the SEC, keeps their hopes alive. Tennessee, UConn. Tennessee, it's in Knoxville. Tennessee is favored by 34.5. I think Tennessee wins this one by 34.5. I don't know. Maybe they don't cover the spread because they don't play all their players, but Tennessee definitely wins this one. Biggest thing Tennessee has to look at is don't get hurt before you have 2 big games on the schedule the next 2 weeks. Texas A&M goes to Ole Miss. Is this upset alert right here? This was what will derail Ole Miss's forward momentum going forward. And so when you look at it, I think I don't think Texas A&M wins this game, but I do think they're gonna give Ole Miss a scare. Why? Because it's 12 o'clock and it's on it's on ESPN at 12 o'clock, and it's a day game, but it's at Ole Miss. Ole Miss doesn't typically do good with day games at Hotty Toddy. I think that gives a little bit of that 4.5 point favorite to Ole Miss instead of something bigger, because they still have an incredible offense. But I do think Ole Miss, I think they cover. I think they win this game. And then you got Georgia, Missouri, 3:30 CBS, Athens. Georgia is a 16-point favorite. And when you look at it, I do think that Georgia wins this game. I think Georgia's at home. It's a 3:30 game. I think the difference in this is every time we've built up a lot about the big passing offense, the Graham Mertz in Florida when he's looked so good, and is everything that's been done defensively that people have come out with about defense is basically, when you look at it, it's based off of honestly like attrition with Georgia the last 2 years. And I think it's unfair to continue to make those comments. So I look at Georgia on offense. I think they showed at Florida they can click with other players getting the ball. I think the defense played really well. Yeah, did they run the ball pretty well? Yeah, but I mean, Florida's run the ball well all year. Missouri has as well. So, but I think Florida is probably the better rushing team out of Missouri. I think Georgia wins this. Do they cover? This is always where it's a little weird. I think this game is closer than 16, maybe like a 7 or a 10, maybe. But I think Georgia wins this game. And then finally, Alabama, LSU, Alabama at home. It's a night game, 7:45. So at the end of the day, man, you want LSU. I mean, you want LSU to continue there. This is weird. I'll give you two things. If it gets into like a knockdown drag out where they're just scoring a lot of points, I think LSU wins, but I think it's going to be a defensive game. I think Alabama will be ready. I think the defense looks really good this year. I think Alabama wins that game, goes to 8-1, and solidifies themselves in that college football playoff talk for the following week. So it's going to be a great game. It's going to be an incredible weekend of college football. The SEC is going to experience some cold weather too, so you can add some cold weather to everybody's resume. I agree. Tuscaloosa is definitely going to make it different, but we're getting to the thick of everything. We're getting to the thick of everything. Go follow at Ready Ted Go on YouTube, Facebook if you already hadn't. Share the video. Tell your friends, go follow it. Looking forward to an incredible weekend. Thanks for joining. You guys have a great night. Bye-bye.